We've had a breakthrough in the last 5 years around large language models. This is for the first time a computer that actually has a model of understanding about pretty much everything in the world. It knows the little nuances of love and gravity and just how the world works, not only physically, but empathetically and socially and emotionally. It has a model of all of that. And so it has the capacity to elevate the naturalness and the common sense nature of our interactions with these tools in a way that we've never had before.
I would say we're in a really important moment in history, but what we do with that moment is equally critical. So we're at a kind of dress rehearsal for the future of AI, where we can see what AI would look like, but the AI we have is not really safe, trustworthy, secure. And we can either go down a path where we say, we don't care, there's enough money to be made, and let's just throw caution to the wind. Or we can say, hey, we want this stuff to work reliably before we let it pervade our lives. The decisions we make around that are going to affect our descendants for a long, long time.
There's a rush everywhere between countries, between companies, between universities to really understand and use these technologies better. They'll reflect the values of the organizations that are investing in it. So I would like to see it extend the free expression of people, democratic values, fair, unbiased access to information. Will we get there? Depends on who builds it.
I realized this technology is bigger than anything I had imagined. It's going to impact our lives and businesses and the world in such a profound way. And that realization actually sent a chill down my spine. It is scary to think that way. It is scary to realize a tool can be that powerful. And we better think about the implication. And to me, that deep implication has to be grounded in the human implication.
From a linguistic point of view, the important thing about a language is that it's a system of signs. And a sign is a pairing of form and meaning. So a word is a sign. Cat, for example, is a word, and it's got both a form, so you can pronounce it cat, or you can write it down C-A-T, and it's got what it means, which is, a cute furry animal, let's say. And those two things are separate, but they're linked in the word. And the thing about language models is that what they're doing is they are manipulating those forms and then spitting them back out in plausible sequences if we set them up as chatbots. But any meaning that's there is all on our side.
The challenge that I see for large language models and chatbots is that they're not actually coming up with any particular explanation. They're rather generating one word at a time what the most likely thing to say would be in the context of what they've been asked. But there's no guarantee about truth because they don't know what's true. They don't have a model. They just have statistical connections between words. So when they're on, they are so on. And when they go off the rails, they really go off the rails.
This generation of artificial intelligence, you can't just, it's not like you can just open up the code and see, oh, that's why it's doing that thing. You can't say, oh, that's the if statement, the if then statement that's causing it that behavior. Because it really, in many ways, is modeling the human brain, where, when people talk parameters, they're the analog of synapses in the human brain. And so there's these massively complicated things. The models are really just a big string of numbers of parameters that are just, manipulating the data and then coming up with an answer. So on that level, yes, it's hard to say exactly what it's doing. Now, I will also say that's true of human beings.
Someone built that chatbot for a reason. And if you don't know what that reason is, then be wary with your interaction, And the other thing is just know that every interaction that you have leaves a footprint on your soul. It changes you. Every interaction we have changes us. And so if you're having a lot of interaction with AI, then you've got to wonder if it's going to affect your interactions with human beings, because these brains of ours have never in the history of humankind interacted with intelligent artifacts. All the talking, all the reasoning, all the interactions we're having with chatbots, for all of human history, we've had those with other people. And so is it a big surprise if our brains can't tell the difference?
I completely understand why people can be afraid of AI. One, we've all seen the dystopian science fiction movies of an AI taking over or doing unintended things.
Nowadays, we're facing this huge problem that every day you have so much more new content generated by AI, and the people just dump to the internet. That probably is going to destroy the search engine industry because there's nothing you can really trust them anymore. So I think that's a huge problem that we as an industry must address.
I am very aware of the threat that they pose for writers and artists. And it's not the threat of being replaced. It's the danger of reduced ability to make a living in an already underpaid profession. It's the danger of having your past work stolen and corrupted and presented in a form that you don't agree with. And it's the problem of having really good work buried in so much dreck, so many imitations, so much bad writing that you can't find the good stuff.
We've built lots and lots of tools that help us build trust in other individuals. And we need to build a similar suite of tools. And actually, I think they're going to look very, very similar. That allow us to establish trust in machines and systems.
So very quickly, we had a widespread adoption of this technology before the field in which it was adopted was ready. And we might see that in a lot of places, in companies, in business as well, using ChatGPT for things where maybe it should not be used or where it should be used with caution. And so this wide adoption in society is coming a bit fast to my taste.
There will not be, as far as I'm concerned, a training objective, a neural network architecture, a data set, whatever combination of all those things that by construction in an engineering manner, we can engineer to be trustworthy. Just like I can't engineer a person to be trustworthy, we have to educate them, certify them, recertify them on an ongoing basis, and so forth. And we have to understand better what situations are in which they might not be as trustworthy and then just deal with that.
Well, I think there are two ways of thinking about trust. One is the idea that we start from the premise that we should trust these systems, and that the problem is that we as users have a kind of irrational fear of them, or we have certain prejudices or anxieties about them that need to be assuaged. We need to be reassured. The other way of thinking about trust is that it's a well-founded recognition that the interests of those who are invested in chatbots and other AI-based systems may not be the interests of the majority of us.
Well, I think my greatest fear is that humans won't develop the level of skepticism about what's going on with chatbots that they need. And I think that that worry is already manifest in a lot of places. And so I think that we need to work as humans to make sure that we are bringing a degree of skepticism to the information that we're getting with chatbots. There is a well-known bias, that if a computer gives you information, people have bias towards believing it. I don't think that's been a very good bias for a long time, and I think we should get even more skeptical.
There's no turning back the clock. It's an unstoppable force. It's another brush. We've had these same arguments with photography back in the day. It's the same old thing. You don't have to worry about AI impacting the livelihood of fine artists at all, because things can't possibly get worse for fine artists. It is the hardest way you can try to make a living. It all comes down to the vision and the idea and the artistic intent. That is primary. That's the human element. How something is actually rendered is of much less interest, and the skill required to do that, well, now is becoming democratized.
You want to navigate well, and paying attention to what the landmines and walls and cliffs and everything else are is a good thing to do that. But I think it's a human amplifier. So given that its role for us right now is as a tool, not as a creature. As a tool, it's not a friend. One of the things that Pi and Inflection that we try to do is say we try to not delude people that you're actually talking to a person, because part of helping you with your life is not to say, spend all your time talking to me, right? It's, hey, have you seen your friends? Are you going, are you connecting with people? Are you happy with this, et cetera, et cetera? That's what you're trying to do. And
some users do not want to relate or talk with other humans, and they actually prefer this option. So we need to have resources for everyone. There are other people that do not have much social connections, and these options are the ones that they can get in the moment of need. So that's valuable for them.
I think AI is a transformative technology. AI is that one moment in our lifetime where everything changes. It is what the internet was for the previous generation. I'm quite confident about that. So I think we will see AI lead to, our productivity levels just skyrocketing.
I think that we're hopeful about some of the right things, such as AI for healthcare. That seems like a very good thing. I think we're hopeful about some things that are generally more risky. For instance, the idea of AI in the first place is you're talking about humans being economically obsolete, which is a risky business. What are we going to do with these AI systems when they can do that? Does this disempower a substantial amount of humanity through automation? What happens to people's livelihoods? So I think that we talk about, especially in the technology community, or that this is a certain good to achieve, and that this will by default be beneficial. And I don't see much evidence of that. I could see it going really either way.
The technology that we built on the internet is inherently insecure, and people have no privacy and security. And if you get chatbots that are a little bit smarter and are told to and have the capability of going out and doing their own reconnaissance, then they'll be able to break into places and collect data. That's one of the big concerns, I think, is not that they're going to be shutting down the power plants, but that they're going to become much better tools for existing hackers.
Back in the 1950s, people thought that it was a summer project for an intern to try to connect a computer to a camera to describe what it sees. Right, and we're still making halting progress toward that. And now when we hear about, whether utopia or dystopia and various confident predictions from technologists, again, we have to remember that they have no clue what they're talking about. They don't know what the future of AI is going to bring. A lot of these questions are not purely about the technology. They're sociopolitical questions about how we're going to collectively decide to react to the technology and adopt it or not adopt it, and to integrate it into our societies.
Number one takeaway for people about where chatbots are today is that these systems are not sentient, they do not have feelings, and AGI is not yet upon us, despite a lot of hype from the marketing departments of flashy startups. And that's not to say that this future isn't coming, but you can treat these systems as very smart, very useful tools, but they are not awake or alive.
The language that I'm using right now to talk to you is a human invention. Isn't that amazing? That we've invented something and then we've co-evolved with it very deeply and also for our society. The same will happen with artificial intelligence. We will co-evolve with this technology. It'll become part of our everyday life. It won't be so exotic. You know, my grandmother told me once, I was walking with her, how when an airplane would fly overhead in New York City, everybody would stop and look at the sky and point and look at each other and ask themselves, what did this all mean?
In a lot of ways, what we're seeing right now is very familiar. Plato famously is on record against the idea of writing itself. He thought it would make people lazy. They wouldn't have to remember things anymore. They could just look them up in an artificial medium. Of course, the only reason we know what Plato had to say, of course, is that it was written down. More recently, word processing spawned many of the same anxieties as chatbots in the 1980s when personal computers and word processors first came on the market. Some authors would hide the fact that they were using them from their editors and agents because they thought people would suspect that a computer had written the book.
We may have AI systems that can write our emails in the very short future. Right now, they help draft it, but maybe they'll automatically respond to some fraction of it. And then they'll keep getting good at that. And then they'll do some other sorts of tasks too, like help you with the PowerPoints. And eventually, it makes sense to replace some people's jobs with these AI systems. And this process can basically continue all the way up to potentially there being AI CEOs. We might not like the sound of this, but the market demands that we basically keep ceding more and more control to them because the companies that do will be more competitive. So the companies that try and resist this trend are much like the companies that try to resist the cotton gin. They just get removed from the marketplace.
We introduced the phrase stochastic parrots as a way to make vivid what it is that large language models are doing. So instead of listening to the input from the user, thinking about it, coming out with a plausible answer, they are stochastically, that is randomly but according to a probability distribution, parroting back things from their training data.
My feeling is we're basically looking into a funhouse mirror of humanity. We're not actually seeing any sort of true alien, bizarre intelligence. We're just kind of seeing a mix and mash of all of our internet behaviors, essentially. So my feeling is that we're not seeing really emergent intelligence, and we are probably seeing just a version of ourselves spit back at us in ways that make sense and are really engaging.
The only understanding that's present in large language models is the understanding that we bring to them, as readers, that we bring to them as people engaged with the textual or visual output that they produce. And so the understanding is all on the human side.
An analogy that I can make is, let's say, like we have some genius of a 5 or 6 year old that's read every book on the planet, but does not have the framework to understand law and ethics and humanity and good and evil and, but they've memorized every book on the planet. You ask them something, of course they're going to say some answer back. So to me, language models first and foremost have pretty amazing powers when it comes to specific kinds of problems that we ask them, where we supply the context. If on the other hand, if you ask a language model a deep philosophical question, these language models were not trained to know anything about what is trustworthy. They don't know what is an authoritative site. So if you think of them as like, I need to ask this model questions and it needs to tell me the absolute truth, which by the way is itself a pretty squishy concept, of course they're not going to look that impressive. On the other hand, in my mind, if you supply the context, I think their powers are pretty remarkable.
I think AI will continue to make progress. I think we will see AI becoming the single most discussed subject in society. I think we will see a whole lot of people starting to think about the questions that are posed by AIs and starting to come up with creative and unexpected solutions that we haven't thought of yet. I think that we will see a huge number of incredible applications and incredible uses of AI, and we'll see lots of existing problems indeed starting to be solved. We'll see a huge amount of economic growth. And we'll also see new problems that are caused by AI that we've never seen before. I think all of these things will happen at the same time. The precise proportions are unpredictable, but yeah, it will be not boring.
In a country of 1.3 billion people, India today has around 200 million people who live in poverty. And we believe very, very strongly that it is our responsibility as technologists to build technology that can dramatically accelerate social mobility, not just in India, but across the global south and across the world, actually, right? Because poverty and lack of social mobility are systemic issues globally, right? I always believe that poverty is not it's not a natural phenomenon, it's a man-made disease, right? And it requires interventions to make sure that these things don't happen again. And I think technology represents one of those interventions, right? It is a very, very powerful tool once if used for good, right? And I think with AI, once again, we have this opportunity to give better jobs to these 200 million people. We have this opportunity to serve people that we haven't served in the past, in India, across the world, and really want to make sure that we don't repeat the mistakes of the internet with AI.